the thing I wanted to show today is morphing. And the reason I wanted to show it is for two reasons. First of all, it's kind of it's a fairly classic technique. So if you're kind of interested in visual effects at all, you kind of might be familiar with this. But also it is a very useful technique, and is actually used a lot more often for cleanup work. So I'm just going to share my screen now. So we'll come back to this in a moment. This is Simon Richardson getting beaten up. And here we have just this clip from this relatively old music video by Michael Jackson. It's called Black or White. And this is the very famous sequence from the end where people morph into different people. So this is the sort of the kind of prime example of what morphing is kind of about, which is taking one actor and actress and turning them into another actor and actress. And then we will kind of see exactly how this part is done as well. But if you think about it, it's like how often do we actually need this? It's like how many of these music videos can you do before this technique gets overused? So how often do we actually need it? And yeah, the answer is not that much. Although very recently, in the last few years, de-aging has actually got a lot more popular. So what you might end up doing is have a younger version of an actor, or a version of an actor with where you painted out some of the crow feet and stuff like that, and then try to kind of blend some of that in there. So it's sort of still very relevant to that, but actually 90% of the times this technique is used for morphing all sorts of other things. It doesn't have to be faces. So let's just get straight to it and see some examples of how we could do this. So here I have an example of a girl and a so we have a real girl and a doll, and this was from a short movie that some escape students worked on some time ago, because every now and again we get short movies and music videos and kind of asking for some assistance and the students to do a few clips here and there for their show reels, and this was one of them. And what they wanted is they wanted basically just to have the real girl's face on the doll, and that was it. But I thought I would use the same footage as an example of how you could do the basic of morphing. So how, if you had one actor or actress, or in the given case a doll and an actress, how could you morph from one to another, sort of to make the transition between them as smooth as possible. So if you do it in the most basic way, and let's do it the most basic way initially. So I'm just going to set my frame range in here. Let's say these 10 frames in here, and let's do something like this. Let's just blend between the two. So we blend with the girl on and with the girl off, and let's view how that looks like. And you can see it's not necessarily great. I'm going to do this as a bounce, play it slightly slower, so we can see it's sort of blending from one to another, and it's quite clearly a visible dissolve. And what the problem is that these things don't line up. So you can see we get this double eyebrows in there, double nostrils, the lips are in different position. So all of that breaks this illusion while we are doing this morph between the two. So the principle between morphing is to take one shape and warp it towards another shape. So I'm just going to really quickly draw a picture because I like drawing pictures. And just to kind of illustrate what the idea behind this technique is let's make this opacity on and bit less softness in here. So if you imagine you have a picture of a cat, and you wanted it to look a little bit more like a house, and you have this house in the end, maybe with sort of 2 chimneys on a roof and 2 windows. Then what you would need to do is you would need to slowly turn this cat by making it a little bit more square and a bit more square and a bit more square until it looks more and more like a house. Again, why would you need this is a different question, but again, just imagining that's actually what we need. So we just keep making this one more square and square and square, and eventually it will overlap with that picture, hopefully really, really well. And likewise, what you need to do initially there, you're morphing the, you're warping the cat, squeezing it to kind of be that shape. And likewise, you have to do a similar one at the same time for the house, to make the house a little bit more round every single time, and get those windows to be a bit more like round as well, and move that door up eventually hopefully beginning to look a little bit more like a cat. So, and that process has to happen simultaneously in the opposite direction. So you will be warping this thing to its final destination, and you will be warping the other one backwards to the source footage. And then when you dissolve between them, hopefully at every single stage, these correspondences, when I kind of see sort of, initially I see all of this and none of this, and then maybe I see 75% of this and 25% of this, then and each one of those cases, the shapes hopefully are similar enough that we don't get this double vision, that we don't get this doubling going on. So in order to achieve this, in Nuke we have spline warp, and with spline warp, what we can do is choose one of them to be the beginning section, one of them to be the end. And what I've already done in here is initially I did a little bit of initial alignment and a little bit of and this is very simply one transform node, so just moving it from there to there, and a little bit of grading as well to kind of make it look a little bit more similar, because otherwise it was too different, and then just cutting it out with a mask. So what we want to do is we want to kind of choose some correspondences between these 2 images, and the easiest way of doing it is to draw them. So I'm going to draw an eyebrow, and normally in Nuke, when you draw roto shapes, you want to close them, except when you're doing these kind of things, you can leave the roto shapes open. So simply by hitting the escape button, you can get an open roto shape. So initially, as I'm looking at this, by default, I'm looking at the A input. I'm looking at this sort of the beginning input in there. And then I want to kind of see how that would correspond with this other image in there. So what I will do is I will take the shapes and duplicate them in B and join. So I will also have them in my B input. So now if I look at my B input, which is the other footage, I can see where the eyebrows are in there. And I can move this to actually correspond. And what you should see as well is, if I maybe grade my image a little bit, these are the correspondence lines. At the moment, they are going from point to point, but that's not always the case. If you have a different number of points, this will still work. You don't even need to use the same original shape. You can draw a brand new one and then join them afterwards. I just find it easiest initially to kind of start with the same shape, move it to where it needs to be, and then put it there. So, like I said, what we need to do in here is morph or warp the source image towards the destination. And this by process, that will happen automatically if you're using this tool of morphing the other one backwards. But we also need to dissolve between the two. So originally, I was just doing a normal dissolve between two images. But now we need to tell it to do that as well. So eventually, when we look at the morph, we want to tell Nuke what is it that we want to see at this stage. And at this stage, we want to see the final image. So let's say we morph from the doll into this girl. And then in the beginning of this, we see the original girl. But we want the eyebrows to be where the eyebrows of the original girl actually used to be. So you can see we are adding this warp. We are adding this movement to make sure that at this stage, we would see the eyebrows lining up. And if I was to look at the final girl, we have moved the eyebrows to the right position. So that's if I don't do it, and that's if we get it to warp and to be in the right position. So we want to start with A, and we move towards B, and we can see the eyebrows are now lining up, but we still get a lot of doubling everywhere else. So I'm going to do the next step in here. And for the next step, what I will do is, you can see the lips still don't match. So I'm just going to just go to the end, just so that all my keyframes are in the same place. We are dealing with still images in here, so it's easier. But I'm just going to draw the mouth. Let's draw one of these. And just going to duplicate this in B and join. Let's look at it in B, see what this mouth looks like in here. We'll need some adjustments. We'll end up more somewhere over there. Again, I could have drawn a brand new mouth for this as well. So at this stage, because this mouth shape that I'm drawing here is actually quite different, you might want to start looking at these correspondences. How are these moving? They seem okay for the moment. And hopefully, when we look at this transition, we should see that it begins to look a little bit better. Let's view it as a morph. So going through it frame by frame, we can see it corresponds better. If you look at the mouth shape now, it's getting harder to tell when are we seeing the regional mouth, when are we seeing the destination mouth. And we can see that, and likewise with eyebrows, we are slowly fading them in, and it's harder to really tell when do we stop seeing the doll eyebrows, when do we start seeing the girl. And this is the main principle with this, is that you need to get as many of these correspondences as accurate as possible. So for example, here, we want to get this, we can still see this double nostril happening. So we might just quickly do those as well. So again, let's look at our A input in here, draw a few quick nostrils. Let's do one over here, and another one over here. And let's select both of them, duplicate them in B and join. Let's view them in B, put them to where they're meant to be, which is somewhere there. And we'll try to get this correspondences here to work. Like with any roto work, you initially try to move shapes together as much as possible, but it's not sort of overly essential as well. You can actually modify exactly where the correspondence itself is happening, which are these yellow lines. So, but we'll come to that. So now we're morphing, and we should see that the nose itself is going to match a little bit better as well. I'm going to turn off my overlays. So hopefully working a little bit better already. Okay. And I'm just going to let this play at maybe 8 frames per second. And let's just play it back and forth. And we can still see that, you know, the eyes are too clearly dissolving over there, and we might want to kind of make them correspond a little bit better as well. And what we might want to do for that purpose is just do these eyes. Now you can see what makes this challenging in this given case is that these eyes are open and these eyes are closed. So we have to kind of find a way to morph between open eyes and closed eyes. And what I might do for this is just draw a few eyes in here, looking at her eyes first, and I'll draw them open first, more or less like this. Press Z to smooth things, which is a good shortcut to know when you're dealing with shapes in Nuke. Z allows you to smooth them. V allows you to select the draw shape tool. Make sure you know your shortcuts, then your life will be easy. And again, going to duplicate them in B and join. View my input B. Make these eyes a little bit more closed, or kind of take this closed eyes shape as if that's the source in here, and try to adjust it a little bit better to place. This one as well. Move this sage over here. Get these top guys in here. And I actually said earlier, you can have a different number of points. So just to illustrate, we can add points, we can delete points. The correspondences are separate from that. The correspondences you can control them separately if you need to, using this correspondence tool. So for example, here we can see there's a fair bit of sideways movement when we do this morphing. So you can add correspondences. You can make sure that your correspondences don't go too much in a twist. But at the moment they sort of look okay. So this correspondence tool allows you to control that. So turning off my overlays again, let's view this morph. So it feels a little bit now like she's closing her eyes, anthropomorphizing the doll, and we sort of end up in the, you know, more in the shape of this final image. So just kind of leaving it for a few frames afterwards. So this is the basic of morphing, and you know that's the kind of classical example. We take a face, we morph it into another face. Happy days, something to kind of, you know, put onto our show reel. We've learned that one chapter from every VFX book there is. How often do you see exactly this effect in the movies? Not that often, really. It's like, you know, it's in sci-fi. Yes, every now and again you do get people morphing to other people, but you know, not in kind of not in every TV series or anything like that. So what, you know, what do we actually, you know, really do with this kind of stuff? I'll tell you. Before I jump on to the next bit, which is the cleanup work, I just want to kind of show you one more thing with this, which is that in the given case, we actually kind of ended up with the problem that we end up with a picture of her in that final position. But for this movie, that was not actually what they wanted. What they wanted was the girl's face on the doll. So by pretty much taking what we started with in here, this is actually the way that you could do this, is taking all the same correspondences. I showed you earlier that we can, that what happens in both of these directions is that we are morphing the doll, we are warping the doll girl closer to her face, and we are taking the girl's face and warping it towards the doll. So in the actual movie, what they wanted is that they wanted the doll to have a girl's face, and there was no dissolve between them. It was always meant to be there. And to make this kind of more easy, you could try to emulate a little bit of the original doll face and kind of match it a little bit towards it. So you can see if in here, if I just quickly undo this last button that I pressed, again I turn off my warping, and I just show you if I only do the warp. So that's what the girl's face originally looks like. And this is what it looks like if I move it closer to the doll's face. And the way I initially did it over there, I just kind of did all of the shapes at once. But if you actually separated out these different shapes into different layers, so for example, if you did the lips separately from the eyes and the eyebrows, you could control them separately as well. So in here, we might feel like, well, actually, if I do a full warp for the mouth, then that will match the doll really well. But that might look a little bit unnatural for the human. But if you're doing it in layers, then you can actually warp each of these layers separately. So not the original mouth, but something closer to where the final mouth is, and to achieve a little bit of that. And since what they actually needed was only a face tracked onto the doll face, then what I've just quickly done here as well is a little quick animation of the eyes closing just on the doll on its own while we do the fade. And as it fades on, we move to the version of the doll. So we see the doll first. We see the doll first. We morph to the girl, just because again I think it's as an illustration that this is an effect we could do. We morph to the girl, but then the problem is, oh no, they're going to pick up that girl, and now we have to make these movements match throughout. Now again, this is something that you totally can do with this technique as well. While we are drawing each one of those shapes, we draw some of them on the source image and some of them on the destination image. We could take these source curves in here and make them actually follow the new position of these eyebrows in the final footage. And same with the nostrils. That's where the nostrils are now. The mouth, that's where the mouth is now. And that's how you could do it. And you know, in a manual way. And that would do the trick. And that's how you would have to do it if you were doing something like this this music video here, where they are dancing, they're moving around. So in order to move, warp from one moving image to another moving image, you have to have these source curves, eyebrows match, her, and then match the other different person there afterwards. So you have to, animate them by hand. In the given case, because we're dealing with a still image, I've simply quickly cheated here a little bit. I've used the brand new grid warp tracker that we have inside of Nuke 12. And I've roughly drawn a grid to match her face and to try to get the smart vectors to track some of it. And it's great because it gives us these small wobbles here as well. And then if we apply this onto this girl footage in here, then we actually get some of this tracking to work as well. I'm just going to pause it on just a few frames before the end over there. So now we get this morph, and then the tracking happens using the grid warp tracker. Now, if you know anything about face tracking and things like that, then the next thing won't surprise you. If you move it too far, you will see that the nose will start stretching. And the reason it starts stretching is that it's quite a big perspective change. We are seeing to the other side of the nose that we didn't see before. So that's you know, a bit of the limitation of the grid warp tracker technique. But this would be something that you could do by doing this spline warps manually, or hopefully one day, if the founder would apply the smart vector tracker tools to their spline warps as well, then that would be amazing. If you want to know more about this grid warp tracker, I did a webinar about this maybe about a month ago. So when that recording goes up, please do check that one out. Great tool, and this could be one of the additional use cases that I didn't cover in that tutorial. So you can go back to that one for extra reference. Cool. So this is the kind of classic example of how to just morph between one or two faces. I'm just quickly going to check the Q&A. Anything new in here? How does morphing actually get used in the real world? That's a good question. Thank you for asking. So most of the time we don't need to warp between faces, but this is much more similar to the type of work that we actually have to do, which is in the given case. I'm going to play this really slowly again and make it bounce back and forth. We have a cable, and we have to paint out this cable, and it's going over the clothes, and that's kind of a problem. We don't want that to happen. So one option for this is to paint it out frame by frame, and sometimes that's what you have to do. And the software like Silhouette that allows you to do that. You can do it in Nuke as well. Silhouette now comes as a plugin as well. So you can actually do Silhouette within Nuke. So you can get a few more advanced paint plugins they have in Silhouette, which is quite nice. And the other nice thing about Silhouette's paintwork is that it allows you to buffer frames more easily. So when you paint over things and paint over them again, when you zoom out and zoom in, it has stored them temporarily in a slightly more efficient way than Nuke does, just because it's a slightly more specialized tool. Nuke allows you to do a bigger variety of things, but for paintwork, if you can use Silhouette, please do. However, this kind of setup here would not be too easy to set up in Silhouette either. So when you want to avoid frame by frame painting, what you might want to do is you might want to sort of paint fewer frames. And what you might want to do is you might want to a few more times. You might be interested in finding the best frames to paint. So frames where you can see things quite clearly, and then what I will do is I will just do one of them as an example of how you would set this up in exactly the same morphing technique that you would normally use for faces. but exactly the same technique applies in here. And the trick is that you paint 2 frames. So rather than painting every frame, you paint 1 frame and a frame a few frames later. So here I might do frame 6 and then frame 10. So I'm just going to paint this quickly. Painting is an important skill, and every compositor should really get comfortable with paint as well, because it will help you out of many cases. Some quick tips for painting. Look at sort of what I'm doing here is I try to follow, when I'm doing clone painting, I try to follow the existing lines in the image. Keep zooming in and out of your image as well, because if you keep looking at things at this pixel level, you might be missing out some of the bigger changes in the kind of just the shading of the where is the shadow and things like that. You know, you might miss some of them out if you look at it too closely. I'm going to remove this from there as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on this arm. We will deal with this jacket separately. I'm just going to extend this in here and just maybe add a bit more darkness under there. Just softly darkening that. So we paint 1 frame. So that's frame 6. And now the reason why frame by frame painting is hard is I would now have to do the same painting on frame 7. And it's hard because I just did 70 quick paint strokes. And if I'm going to do 70 quick paint strokes on frame 7, they're probably going to look quite different. And then you do it on frame 8, and they're going to look quite different. So what you will get is this sort of wobbling, boiling effect. And you want to avoid that. The technique to avoid that also hopefully means a little bit less work for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another auto paint on the side. Another auto paint in here. And I'm going to frame hold this. And let's do frame 10. And I'm just going to quickly paint this as well. Partly to show that this is actually how you would do this. Is you would I'm not kind of making this up. Another trick for painting in Nuke is you can start with lower opacity. Gets you slightly smoother results initially. And just like I said, try to follow any existing curves in the folds of the shirt. So don't paint across them, but try to kind of extend them instead. So if I can see a fold going in that direction, I need to make it continue in that direction. And then here I kind of have this small area of darkness in his armpit. Let's quickly paint that in as well. Zoom in and out, which is important. Easy to forget. The alternative for zooming in and out is squinting. What you do when you squint at your images is actually dealing with different levels of detail. So if you squint at an image, you're looking at kind of bigger shading. If you're looking at it closer, you see the smaller details, and you want to get both of them right. Okay, so now really quickly painted 2 frames, frame 6 and frame 10. And what I want to do is I want to make up the frames 7, 8, and 9 in between. And I'm only using that arm, so we'll just do that. So in order to achieve this, I will use this exact same warping technique, spline warp. This will be my input A, and this will be my input B. I'm going to delete my old viewer. And with this spline warp, I'm just going to sort of look at my inputs A and B and see what remains consistent between them. What is it that I can kind of continue to track with my eyes? So I'm looking at this top of the the arm, this fold in here, and maybe where this sleeve kind of folds into the shoulder in there. So I might use those frames as my to make my sort of starting shapes in there. So I'm going to do this little triangle kind of thing in here, and let's try to see that. And again, I'm just going to, I could draw a brand new triangle just by looking at image B and then join them afterwards. And that's perfectly fine as well. You can actually do this. And like I said, you don't need to have the same number of points. You can have any number of points you have. The only thing you need to remember is that you need to draw them in the same direction. So if you draw them clockwise first, you have to draw it clockwise on the second input as well. Because if you don't, then the correspondences will go in a twist, and Nuke unfortunately doesn't resolve that. So I've drawn the same shape in here. If I look at both of them at once, I can see that they're not connected. And then I can use the join tool in here and join these two shapes together. So that's my source, that's my destination. And it didn't like it yet. So I might need to update these curves and sorry, these correspondences. And I think I may have done the same mistake that I just told you about, which is, did I actually draw one of them in the other direction? Because what you can see here is we are getting some of them crossing each other, and I can't uncross them because I will always have one that will. So that will go to that corner. This could go somewhere here. This could go somewhere there. That could be the top corner there, and this could be that corner there, and then this could actually no, that's okay. So these are the correspondences. They're basically telling this part of the arm will go in there, this part of the arm will go in there, and so on. So here you can see we are looking at how we are warping frame 6 towards frame 10. It warps in that direction. Or if I set the mix in the other direction, this is frame 10. How does that warp towards frame 6? And again, we want this, we want them to be matching as well as possible, so that when we dissolve between them, we would see as little transition or like as little doubling happening as possible. I'm just going to add one more sort of triangle for this other fold underneath, because the more detail, the more correspondences you can add between your images, the better. And just going to escape that. I will try to avoid overlapping shapes, because that can also slightly confuse Nuke every now and again. And I'm just going to say, this time I will duplicate in B and join. I will view where this shape is in B. It's over there. And I will kind of try to figure out what exactly does this triangle now relate to. It's sort of this triangle in here. So now if I look at my morph, if I do a mix halfway through, then we can see that they are in like, now I'm viewing exactly both of them at the same time. I'm viewing half of frame 6 and half of frame 10, and I'm looking at them in the position of frame 6, or halfway through, or in the position of frame 10. And we can see that by adding more of these correspondences, we are getting less and less of this sort of double vision of where the rest of the hand would be. I'm just going to do one more, and then we'll actually implement this. Let's do one for maybe this fold in there. So that fold in there. Whoops. Duplicate in B and join. Sing my duplicate in B and join tune. Hum, 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 hum. And that's probably somewhere there. I think it's that fold. Should look at my A again. Or it might be the fold that's just above this. I think it's actually more like this fold in here. There. All right. And if you look at our morph, we have even less of this double vision. Again, so you can see as I dissolve from one image to another, they overlap quite nicely. So the point is, in the end, what I want to do is on frame 6, I want to see frame 6 in the position of frame 6, and on frame 10, I want to see frame 10 in the position of frame 10. So it has to be not over there, but over there. And then for the frames in between, I have now made up a few extra frames. So this is a morph. And then how you use it is, in essence, you need to just show this bit on top of your original footage. So I'm just going to do a quick key mix in here. And I'm doing a key mix to just kind of be lazy. So the way that key mix works is that it shows you input B, or it shows you input A wherever you have drawn a mask. So I just want to kind of show a mask somewhere in that area. So here I'm showing my paintwork on frame 6, before and after. And I'm just going to animate this mask to move along with my paintwork as it moves in there. Maybe let's go a bit more like that. So ignoring this bit in here, that part is kind of on green screen anyway, and it's sort of a separate problem, because we need to paint that out and just paint that green. Once we actually pull our key, that will disappear. But we can now see that by simply drawing 2 frames and morphing between those 2 frames, we have actually generated 4 frames. So, and the benefit of this is that if we had painted those other 2 frames in between ourselves, they probably would have been more wobbly, and would have been introduced kind of more sort of artifacts to deal with. So I'm just very quickly going to check any Q&A. What is the name of the plugin Silhouette? That name is called, I'm going to answer live. It's interesting. It's interesting options. So that one is called Silhouette Paint, I think, and it's made by Boris FX. So they're the guys who make Mocha, and recently last year, was it last year or the year before? Last year, I think. They bought Silhouette, so now that is available as a plugin as well. Which is great. So that's groovy. Now you might be asking me, well, that sorts out those, frames, but what if we have, we want to do the rest of this? Because basically we want to do a little bit before this as well. So that sorts out frames 6 to 10, but what about frames 1 to 6? So the idea is that, well, first of all, you've already sorted out frame 6. Frame 6 is looking nice. So you don't need to do anything with frame 6, because that's all groovy. What you do need to do is you need to make a new frame before that. I'm just going to do a paint and frame hold in here. In fact, I'm going to be, because you've already seen how I do paint and frame holds, I'm going to be lazy and steal it from the one I did before. So we are going to paint let's do frame 3, so we have enough. So what we now need to do is we also need another morph from frame 3 to frame 6. And the technique itself is exactly the same. You just morph, you can do a spline morph from point A towards point B. And again, just to kind of save time in here, there is one I made earlier. The technique is exactly the same. We draw shapes in one position, and we draw shapes in the other position. So here these are the A shapes, or this is the, you can see here, these are the source shapes, and you can layer them if you want to, because it is nice to keep these things tidy. And these are the destination shapes, and we are simply morphing between the two. Let me just check. And I think in that case, what I did is actually, because it was easier to look at frame 6, because we see more of the arm, I'm actually morphing from frame 6 towards frame 3. Same difference. So you can see that's that morphing happening over there. And the good thing is, because this frame 6 comes through this morph and through this morph. So if I'm actually on frame 6, it doesn't matter which of these two spline warps I'm looking at. Then I can very simply switch from that spline warp to that other spline warp using the switch node. So I do switch. And I could set the keyframe in here, but those of you who like scripting stuff, the neat expression to switch from 0 to 1 on a particular frame, you can just ask, is my frame bigger than 6? So on frame 6, it is not bigger yet, because because it is 6. 6 is not bigger than 6. 6 is equal to 6. So it will show you input of 0. And on frame 7, it is now true. It will show you input 1, because 7 is bigger than 6. So my frame is 7. It is bigger than 6. So at this moment, I will switch. You could do this with keyframes as well. Very easy. Just set it 1, 0, and 1. But I find this works as well. And then of course we need to make sure that our mask covers this whole area. And again, with sort of, relatively quickly, with not too much effort, maybe needs a little bit more softness on this mask edge, so we don't get a hard edge. With relatively little effort, we have painted out a few more frames again. And then, in the beginning, you might need to do it, 1 or 2 more times, or you might just paint those out manually, which is what I have done in here. You can paint frame by frame as well. Occasionally, if things change too much, and they change a lot on every single frame, then frame by frame painting is the best technique to use. But if things are kind of in the shot for a couple of frames, then you want to kind of make this transition from here to here as smooth as possible. So warping might be the technique to use. Cool. So this is the morphing technique, and this in here is how it is actually used most of the time in visual effects. This technique is called invisible visual effects, changing things in a way that no one in the audience should know that actually happened. And ideally, you will end up with I guess, cool work for your showreel and the paycheck. These are the two things that we really actually like to work for. But also the artistic knowing that the result that I have created here is better than I could have created with some other techniques. To wrap this up, I'm just going to show you what you can do if you combine these different techniques. Because here I've just shown you the morphing technique with just a spline warp. So what is the main limitation of this technique is that these correspondences in here, because I'm doing 2 still frames and I'm interpolating between them, all these lines are straight lines. So this patch can only warp from that patch to this other patch in a straight line. It can't do a curved motion, which means that you have to use general rotoscoping techniques of finding the extremes of your motion. So if you have a bouncing ball, you found the moment where it is on the ground or where it is right above, at the top, and then when it's on the ground again, and then a few keyframes in between. But you can't do on the ground, and then have it animate on a curve. It only animates in straight lines. So you have to do this, estimation of it by setting enough keyframes to actually estimate the overall motion. However, Nuke does have other computer vision tools that allow you to do morphing on a kind of more advanced level these days, such as this grid warp tracker that we saw earlier, or simply the smart vectors themselves. So what I have done here in this other example for the jacket is it's a little bit harder, the work that we have to do for the jacket, because if you look at it here, for the jacket, not only do we have to paint out the cable, but we also have to paint these folds a little bit to make it look less like it's being pulled. So in the given case, I've tried to make this folds sort of engross each other, so that it maybe just feels like that's just a natural way that this jacket folds when this man is being mega punched. So, and then I've used a little bit of reveal painting, moving things around. If you want to paint in Nuke, the good trick is to use onion skinning. So when you take a frame, you move the other frame to overlap with it as much as you can, and then hopefully then you can reveal paint some of that. So that's one of the frame by frame painting techniques. But again, I've just painted frame 6 and frame 10, and I've also painted frame 1, where the jacket is in a different position. And what I'm doing this time is I'm using the smart vectors, which allow you to warp the whole image by basically, it's as if you're doing a tracker for every single pixel in your image, and as if every single pixel is trying to be moved to the next frame, and then to the next frame, and then to the next frame, which gives you these kind of results. So if I just look at this frame 1, as I warp it towards all these other frames, this is the kind of result that you get. Kind of trippy. And you can see what the problems with this technique are is that it doesn't really do well with occlusions. So if it's trying to show you frame 6, by that time this arm should be revealed, but you can't use frame 1. It doesn't have those pixels. You can't see that arm in there. So hence you get this kind of stretchiness. But it is quite good at kind of estimating this general motion in a very, very natural way. And because we aren't morphing between anything new, we are morphing between frames that come from the actual image themselves. We just painted them a little bit. I'm again warping from frame 1 towards frame 6. And at the same time, this is my frame 6. On this frame 6, my vectors are exactly as they used to be. I'm morphing them backwards towards frame 1 and later forwards towards frame 10. But on frame 6, it should look identical because that's my reference, or like it should look original because that's my reference frame. Likewise with frame 10, it looks great in the end, but as I morph towards the beginning, it looks weirder and weirder and weirder. But I can dissolve between all of them. So initially I dissolve from frame 1 towards frame 6. So on frame 6, I see frame 6. On frame 1, I see frame 1. And in between, I see a blend between them. So I'm seeing a morph. And this morph, I didn't have to animate myself. Nuke took care of some of these estimations of where things are moving by generating these smart vectors. And likewise from frame 6 to frame 10, again, I'm seeing the morph between those two. And again, Nuke is taking care of that. And you can see these folds at the back. This is what I painted on frame 10. This is what I painted on frame 6. And what we see in between, some kind of a blend between the two. And that blend moves believably. And you know, that's great. So if we take this work that we did here and combine it, I'm just reveal painting on this work that we did for the arm over there. We still get a few small errors because it doesn't overlap precisely. And in those overlap areas, we might just do a little bit more frame by frame paintwork just to kind of clean up some of those edges. And that way we have one morph that's happening for the arm, and that's the one that we did with spline warps. And we have another morph that's happening for the jacket, which is using another spline warp. And then we do have a little bit of frame by frame cleanup. So I'm just tidying up those first 2 frames in here. As you can see, some of this first 2 frames, painted them out manually because it was easier that way. But the rest of it is just doing a little bit of cleanup on those first few frames, giving it a bit of a highlight. It actually wasn't originally there, but I thought it looks more consistent with the frames afterwards if it has that highlight. So less wobbling and just a little bit more kind of filling in any final overlapping areas and making sure that they are nicely few frames, fix them manually, and that's how morphing is actually used in the real world. I'm going to put this back to play slowly and leave this playing backwards and forwards in the background. This cable here, we haven't painted out the rest of it because this part is easy. That part is green screen. When we key it, we kind of more or less get rid of it anyway, and then I would address that at that stage. But this part here, where you have cables going on top of clothes, this is sort of the bread and butter of real compositing. That's the hard stuff. Cool. That's basically everything I actually wanted to say tonight. Just going to open this for a Q&A. Could you use Mocha to do the tracking? Yes-ish. Basically, Mocha is a planar tracker. So Mocha gives you a surface that moves relatively rigidly. If the patch is small enough, then Mocha will do a fairly good estimation of that. But the point of what we have actually seen today is that, and even in here, when we're doing these warpings and stuff, is that different parts of this surface will move differently. So we get a different amount of warping, even when we're doing the screed warp tracker in the lips, as opposed to the eyebrows over there. So you could, in theory, track that one eyebrow with a Mocha tracker and then import this information into your spline warps and use it in there. But also you would have to do it one Mocha tracker for every section, one for the eye, one for the lips, and then combine them into the spline warp workflow. So whereas this workflow here, especially the smart vectors part, it's warping every pixel slightly differently. So for the back of the jacket, we hopefully get this slightly different amount of deformation at the top as opposed to the bottom or even in the middle, and you might get more curvy looking things if that's how the cloth moves. So yes and no. Yes for small areas, but no for bigger areas. Thank you everyone for attending, and hopefully see you guys soon.